everyone, welcome to the very first podcast of Aviz built for the AI era, where we get into what's new and what's evolving across our products. So, I'm Shruti Agrawal and I work as a digital marketing specialist here at Aviz Networks. And joining me today is Ravi Kumar, our solution architect. Since this is our first episode, we thought there's no better place to start than with what's new with Network Copilot and get into something of the exciting developments happening with the product recently. So, Ravi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Shruti.
So let's begin with an overview of R1.7.0. What's the focus of this release and what should the audience know before we get into the specifics?
The release 1.7.0, right, it's mainly about moving NCP from a powerful interactive assistant to more of an operational platform, basically. So in earlier releases, the focus was largely on asking questions, connecting data sources, and getting insights from your telemetry logs, configuration, or any kind of network data, right? And that remains important. But for 1.7.0, the focus expands to repeatable operations. So that can run in the background, agents that can be customized, auto prompt suggestions that guides the users better, and artifacts that make the output easier to consume, export, and share. The main point here is 1.7.0 is not just a feature release. It improves how teams integrate AI into their day-to-day network operations. And there are four themes I would like to highlight basically here. The first being automation. So background jobs allows team to run reoccurring or on-demand workflows without somebody sitting at the chat window every time that they want to do something, right? Second is extensibility. So teams can now build their own custom agents using the Network Copilot SDK that we have for their own workflows, their own tools, their own custom environment that they might have. Third is usability. So with prompt suggestions and autocomplete, it reduces dependency on users knowing the perfect prompt. So this is very important because not every user is a network expert or an AI prompt expert, right? And then fourth would be consumable output. So NCP does not just produce raw data. It can generate CSVs, Excel files, charts, tables, PDFs, all kinds of different artifacts for you. You can preview them, export them, visualize them if you want to. And so you have something that the team can review and you have the results that can be shared later. So the audience should see 1.7.0 as a release that connects the AI assistant with real world operations. So you have scheduled checks, you have repeatable audits, you have telco analytics with our service node, network upgrade validations, customer-centric reporting, custom agents for your different workflows that you might have.
So, Ravi, starting with the background jobs, what has changed there and what is the workflow a team could now automate?
So background jobs are one of the most important changes in this release because it changes how teams interact with Network Copilot. So instead of treating Network Copilot as something you ask questions in real time, teams can now define the workflow that they want to run in background. The work can be either scheduled or triggered on demand, and it can be controlled via RBAC and then followed up through notifications, basically. The practical benefit here is that team does not need to manually repeat the same operational checks every day or every other week. So, for example, right, a network operations team could automate a daily health check workflow. So every morning, NCP can run a job that checks device health, interface errors, critical alarms, and any network changes that might have been made. And then the results can be sent as a notification or made available as an artifact for review. Another good example would be security compliance. So let's say a team could schedule a weekly audit for their network that checks the AAA configurations, SSH, RBAC, ACLs, or any different policies that they want to check. And instead of waiting until an audit window or an escalation happens, the team get a recurring view of whether the network is drifting away from the required baseline as per the company policy. And RBAC is important here. So background automation is useful only if it's governed properly, right? So not every user should be able to create, run, or modify these types of jobs. So 1.7.0 makes this more controlled by tying job capabilities to user roles and responsibilities, basically. And then with notifications, we try to close the loop. So let's say if a job completes, fails, or something happens, right? The user gets a notification right away, whether it be in app or with, let's say, Slack integration. And the simplest way to explain would be is like background jobs convert network copilot from a question answer based system into a repeatable operational assistant, basically.
Since agents can now operate more autonomously in the background, could you walk us through the custom agent SDK? Like, what does it enable teams to build?
So with the custom agents and the network copilot SDK that we have, so this kind of forms the extensibility layer. So it turns NCP from a fixed product into a flexible platform that teams can extend, integrate, and adopt to their own custom workflow. So NCP already has inbuilt agents and data connectors, but every customer environment is different, right? So different customers have different tools, escalation process, data sources, compliance rules, and then they have their own internal SOPs, right? So the SDK allows teams to capture those differences by building custom agents that integrate with NCP. So custom agent can be very specific to a customer's workflow. For example, right, one customer might want an agent that checks BGP health, correlates it with syslog, look at recent changes, and then generate an RCA style summary. Another customer might want an agent that looks at firewall logs already present, let's say in an Elastic cluster somewhere, identify applications by using data coming in from a service node, and then produce a daily telco analytic kind of a report. Or they might just want to do an upgrade compliance agent that compares the pre and post checks before an upgrade is done to a switch or a router, right? And the idea here is that NCP SDK lets these teams package their domain knowledge into a reusable agent, basically. It enables teams to define what the agent can do, what external systems it can query, what data it should return in what format, how the result should be structured, and that makes it useful for, let's say, different teams, right? So you have partner teams that might want to look at the data in a different structure. You have CS teams, solution architects, engineers, right? It also helps avoid one-off scripting. So many teams today will have their own Python scripts, their own runbook, manual commands that they run, dashboards, spreadsheet type reporting that they might have there for their own consumption, right? The SDK gives them a clear path to convert those into agent-driven workflows inside NCP. For technical users, the SDK matters because it supports more advanced workflows. So for, let's say, you can have single or multi-agent tool, you can have asynchronous workflows, you can have stateful or memory-based agents, you can have data connector-based agent, or you can also have multi-agent orchestration for your very complex workflows, right? Simply put, the SDK makes NCP adaptable to customer operating model instead of forcing every customer to work the same way. It also support safer rollout model. So let's say if you want to try it out, teams can start with read-only or analytic agents first, validate the results, and then gradually move towards a more autonomous model. So SDK is not just a developer feature, it is how NCP becomes customizable, repeatable, and then customer specific, right?
Now that teams can build and automate their own agents, how does that connect with prompt suggestions and the improved autocomplete? Like, does this make these agents easier to use on a day-to-day basis?
So prompt suggestion and autocomplete are important here because they solve a very practical adoption problem for any A product. So even when the backend is very powerful, users may not know what to ask or how to ask to get a better answer. A network engineer, a support engineer, a manager, a security analyst, they all might want a different outcome from the same data. Prompt suggestion helps guide them towards more useful action, basically. So, for example, right, instead of expecting a user to write a perfect prompt for flow analytics, Network Copilot can suggest prompts like, hey, show top traffic by IP address, identify unusual patterns, and then summarize the results. Or let's say compare today's traffic with yesterday's baseline, right? And same thing for security audits, right? So it can suggest you prompts around RBAC, ACLs, or CIS mapping that you might have. And then autocomplete improves the experience further by helping users complete context-aware prompts. So this reduces friction and then makes the system much more natural to use. So for example, right, you don't have to remember all your different IP addresses, all the different host names that you have in your network right now. NCP will auto-complete those for you once you start typing, right? And this directly connects with custom agents. So if a team builds custom agents, but users do not know how to use them, that option will be very weak. So prompt suggestion acts as an entry point for them. So they expose the right actions to the user without making the user remember exact syntax or internal name on what to use, how to call that agent basically. So this makes the agent and NCP easier to use on day-to-day basis. And the main value I would say here is not just convenience, it's consistency. So suggested prompts help standardize the way NCP interact with different teams. So how teams generate different audits, different report, different analytics. That means you will get fewer vague prompts, you will get fewer incomplete answers, and then you will have more repeatable outcomes for the same data that you have in your network right now, right? And you can think of it this way. Prompt suggestions are like guided workflows that help you get value from Network Copilot faster, even if you're not an expert in the underlying data or AI prompting, basically.
So, Ravi, once a result is generated, whether from a custom agent or a suggested prompt, that is where artifacts come in, right? So, could you walk us through what happens to that output now?
Yeah. So artifacts address what happens after NCP generates an answer. So in many operational workflow, the answer itself is not enough. Teams need to review it, they need to export it, share it, maybe attach it to a ticket, create an incident report, or just save it for comparison later, right? With this release, output can be handled more like a working object rather than just a chat response. So if NCP generate, let's say, Tableau data, users can preview it. And if the results need to be shared or processed further, it can be exported to CSV or an Excel file. And if the data is understood visually better, you can ask NCP to create an interactive chart for you. And then the output remains in the working session for the chart that you are having so that the model have additional context when you are trying to interact with it. And this is important for both technical and non-technical users. So let's say for an engineer, an artifact might be a table of devices that failed a compliance check that he needs to export, a list of interfaces with error spikes, or just a before and after comparison of what happened after an upgrade. For a manager, it might be a chart showing the traffic trends in the data center right now, any kind of risk postures that they have generated, or the number of devices that failed a compliance check, basically, right? So the main change is that NCP is not only answering questions for you, it is producing a usable output that supports collaboration, reporting, and then decision making for you, right? And a good way to summarize it would be artifacts turn NCP generated insights into evidence that teams can inspect, export, and then eventually act on.
To bring this together with real use cases, how do Avis Service Node, Telco Analytics, and Security Audit enhancements combine agents, prompts, and artifacts for an actual customer?
This is where the release becomes very concrete for a customer. So AV Service Node or ASN Telco Analytics is a good example because it combines different data connectors, agents, prompts, and then artifact into a real workflow, basically. So in any telco or service environment, customers care about where the traffic is coming in from, where it is going, what service nodes are involved, what traffic patterns are changing, and are there any anomalies in the network, right? So with the Elastic Data Connector, NCP can use flow and log data that the customer already has. The agent can process the data and answer high-level questions for them. For example, right, a user could ask, show me top UE by traffic volume, identify unusual traffic changes, summarize the traffic by source or destination ASN, or simply just like generate a traffic report for a specific time window where an issue might have occurred. And then prompt suggestions make this workflow easier to discover. A user does not need to know the exact query they need to ask. They can start from suggested prompts and then refine later, basically, right? And then security enhancements follow same model, but for compliance and hardening. So it can also map CIS controls for you, so which matters because customers do not just want the technical output; they want to understand the compliance posture and the risks that are in the network right now. And then pre and post upgrades are also important here because NCP can generate a baseline for you before an upgrade has happened in a network. And then after an upgrade is done, you can basically check the stats, compare stats of what happened before and after an upgrade is done. And that helps reduce risk, give the stakeholders more confidence for an upgrade, basically, right? So when you combine these points together, the workflow could look something like this. A user starts with a suggested prompt for a custom workflow that they might have. A background job or a custom agent performs the analysis for them. The agent pulls the right data from the right data connector. So let's say an Elastic or a Splunk connector for telco or logs or flow data. It generates the results for them, makes the artifacts available based on the reports that were generated. And this is the real value that basically Network Copilot has for the release 1.7.0. So it connects automation, customization, usability, and output handling into one operational workflow that you can follow. And for customers, it is beneficial because you get faster insights, you have more repeatable checks, you have better audit readiness, and then you basically put in less manual effort to do something, right? And if I had to summarize it in one line, NCP helps uh, basically move away from answering operational questions to running operational workflows for the customers. Yeah,
Yeah, great note to end on. Ravi, thank you so much for walking us through this. It
yeah,
was great talking to you.
yeah. Thank you for your time, Shruti. Yeah, nice to talk to
Thank
you.
you.